You know, we often think about the parts of ourselves and reality that are right there in front of us. But what about the hidden stuff, the layers underneath? Today, we're doing a deep dive into some really uh, pretty fascinating ideas that seem to pop up across different spiritual paths.
Right?
We're talking about this concept of a shadow body, something called the violet flame, and even this idea of a divine womb.
These are deep currents for sure.
Yeah, and we've got sources from all over modern esoteric teachers, ancient Egypt, shamanism, theosophy, Kabbalah, Gnosticism, Western traditions, Vedic texts, Taoism, esoteric Christianity, Sufism. It's quite a mix.
A real cross-section.
Exactly. And the goal, our mission, I guess, is to just illuminate these ideas, see if we can find some parallels, maybe get a richer sense of what they're pointing towards.
Sounds good. Where should we start? The shadow body seems like a natural entry point.
Agree. So let's look at this modern esoteric concept first, the RaSha Body, from Lisa Renee's work, right?
Yes. It's described as a dark matter template of consciousness, sort of the original blueprint for our eternal light.
Dark matter template,
Yeah,
but for light.
exactly. That's the paradox. It's apparently called one light, but it's fundamentally a body of, well, primordial darkness fused with spirit.
Okay, so like a hidden matrix.
Sort of, yeah. A shadowy matrix that unites cosmic intelligence and even gender energies. It's presented as the source from which the light body actually emerges.
Wow. So the light body is born from this dark template.
That's the idea. And activating it, making it conscious, apparently involves dealing with what are called interior shadows.
Interior shadows, like negative patterns.
Pretty much inverted anti-life patterns held within that template. The idea is you have to purge or transmute those to restore the original divine blueprint.
So it's not just a neutral blueprint, it holds our unresolved stuff too.
It seems so.
Yeah.
It's both potential and repository.
Interesting. And this whole idea of a shadow body, it's not entirely new, is it? I mean, the ancient Egyptians.
Oh, definitely not new. The Egyptians had a very sophisticated understanding of the soul, or the different parts of a person. Two parts are really relevant here, the ka and the shoot.
Okay, the Ka and the shoot.
Right. The ka was seen as the vital double, like an astral twin carrying the life force, a ghostly duplicate almost.
Fine.
And the shoot was the actual literal shadow. But they believed it contained an essence of the person, something that endured after death.
The shadow itself contained an essence.
Yes. And what's really fascinating is that some of their spells actually affirm the power of the shadow. It wasn't just a byproduct. It could be seen as a protective entity, a helper in the afterlife.
A protective shadow that flips the usual script.
It really does. And this theme keeps recurring.
Hmm.
In shamanism, you often hear about the etheric body, referred to as the double or even the shadow body.
Right, the invisible counterpart.
Exactly. And theosophy, which drew a lot from Vedic ideas, talks about the linga sharira.
That's Sanskrit.
Yes, for the subtle body or etheric double. And Blavatsky and others explicitly called it the shadow body of the physical form. So it's a very consistent thread.
Okay, so we have this idea of a double, a subtle template. But then you get into things like Kabbalah, and it seems darker, the Qliphoth.
Ah, yes, the Qliphoth.
Nice thread.
That's definitely a more complex and often seen as darker aspect. They're called husks or shells. They represent the shadow side of the tree of life.
The shadow of the Sephiroth.
Exactly. They're seen as impure forces like cosmic waste products or imbalances left over from creation. Think of them as chaotic, inverted images of the divine attributes represented by the Sephiroth.
So not just a template, but the potential for things to go wrong. The distortion.
Precisely. It mirrors that RaSha idea of inverted patterns within the template needing to be cleared. It's the potential for imbalance inherent in the structure itself.
And Gnosticism touches on this too.
It does. Some Gnostic texts speak of a kind of shadow or counterfeit spirit that clings to the soul. It's seen as a false image, sometimes linked to a deficiency or fall of Sophia, wisdom.
And it needs to be shed.
Right. It's something the seeker needs to recognize and discard to reach true gnosis, true knowledge and light. Again, that resonates with purging the interior shadows of the RaSha body.
Okay, so if we try to synthesize this, the shadow body across these traditions, RaSha, Kalika, Linga Sharira, maybe even the Qliphoth in its own way,
Yeah.
seems to represent this kind of boundary zone.
Yeah, like a liminal space between pure spirit and dense form.
Acting as a blueprint maybe on the subtle or even dark side of reality, a mold for light and life.
But also Critically, a place where unresolved energies, those interior shadows, collect.
Right. So the esoteric message seems to be that real spiritual growth isn't just about chasing the light.
No, it absolutely involves making the unconscious conscious, bringing awareness to and integrating these shadow aspects, illuminating that hidden template so the light that is there can fully shine.
Makes sense. Okay, so from the shadow template, let's shift focus to the light, specifically this idea of the violet flame and the amethyst order. This sounds much more active, transformative.
Definitely transformative. In the same modern esoteric lineage we mentioned, the Amethyst Order is described as one of the three original founder emanations of consciousness for our universe.
Alongside emerald and gold orders.
Exactly. The Amethyst Order is specifically linked to the magenta-violet ray frequencies and is sometimes associated with the cosmic Holy Father principle or the divine masculine aspect in its purest form.
Okay. And who are the beings involved?
The sources mention highly evolved consciousnesses, like beings called amethyst dragon kings, and also Brahmarama cetaceans, basically, high-dimensional beings who were supposedly the first to carry this violet flame current.
Wow. Dragon kings and cosmic whales.
Yeah, it's pretty cosmic stuff. They're seen as guardians of something called the violet flame god seed and wielders of the 7D violet ray codes.
What do these codes do?
Transmutation and divine will. Their core function is described as rehabilitating distorted or corrupted masculine energy, often referred to symbolically as the rod principle, and restoring spiritual balance using these violet frequencies.
Rehabilitating the masculine principle?
By acting as high-dimensional progenitors, essentially. Transmuting negativity, clearing distortions, and helping to reunite the masculine and feminine energies back into sacred union, or hydroskamos.
Okay, that's the modern esoteric take. But the violet flame itself, that idea has earlier roots, doesn't it, in Western traditions?
Oh, absolutely. The color violet itself has long been associated with spirituality and transformation in the West. You see it in religious contexts, like for penance or high initiation in the church.
Right.
And in Theosophy's system of 7 rays, the 7th ray is violet, linked to ceremonial magic, order, and importantly, mercy.
But the idea of a flame, a consuming fire,
Yeah.
where did that really take hold?
That became much more prominent in the early to mid-20th century, especially with metaphysical movements like the I Am activity founded by Guy Ballard and later the Saint-Germain Foundation.
Saint-Germain. He's almost synonymous with the violet flame.
He absolutely is. These groups taught that individuals could consciously invoke this violet light, often calling it the violet consuming flame of divine love, generated by their own divine self, their mighty I Am presence.
And the purpose was purification.
Exactly. To transmute negative karma, dissolve discordant energies, purify the self, and ultimately aid in the process of ascension. Followers use specific prayers or affirmations called decrees for this.
And Saint-Germain is seen as the master overseeing this ray.
Yes, he's considered the Chohan, or Lord, of the 7th ray, the ascended master who gifted this knowledge and practice to humanity in this era.
It's interesting how these concepts evolve. Is there a parallel in esoteric Christianity, too?
There is. You find Archangel Zadkiel often associated with the violet ray, sometimes called the angel of mercy and transmutation, and his divine complement, or twin flame, is known as Holy Amethyst.
Holy amethyst, so a feminine aspect there.
Yes, which is an interesting contrast. In the modern system, the Amethyst Order relates to the cosmic father principle, these powerful masculine aspected beings. In esoteric Christianity, Holy Amethyst is this feminine angelic presence.
But both connect to the violet flame.
Correct. Both traditions converge on the violet flame as this powerful tool for spiritual alchemy, a living fire that envelops the soul and burns away the dross, the impurities.
So regardless of the specific figures, ascended masters, archangels, dragon kings, the flame itself is about purification and transformation.
Precisely. And in that modern framework, the Amethyst Order is seen as key to clearing those distortions in the masculine rod principle we mentioned, and also igniting this violet flame god seed within individuals. It's about healing old patterns.
The color itself, violet or purple, seems really significant symbolically.
It really is. It's the highest frequency in the visible light spectrum, right on the edge of the unseen, so it naturally symbolizes that threshold to the spiritual, the numinous.
A doorway, almost.
You could say that. And it's a blend of red, often linked to earth, passion, the physical, and blue linked to the heavens, spirit, tranquility, so it inherently symbolizes the union of opposites.
Hieroskamos again. Transfiguration.
Exactly. You see echoes in Kabbalah, where the Sephira Yesod Foundation is sometimes seen as purple or indigo, acting as a filter. In Hindu traditions, the crown chakra, Sahasrara, the connection to divine consciousness, is depicted as violet or white.
And amethyst crystals themselves are used for spiritual insight and purification.
Right, so the Amethyst Order in this context feels like a modern synthesis, pulling together this ancient symbolism of violet amethyst with the concept of cosmic spiritual guardians. Kind of like a modern order of Melchizedek, but focused on this specific ray.
Embodying the flame's power.
Yes, personifying that transformative quality of the violet flame, its ability to consume negativity, transmute karma, and help restore the original divine plan or blueprint. Whether individual or cosmic, it's about burning away the old to make way for a higher octave of being.
That's a powerful concept. Oh, okay, let's go even deeper, perhaps to the very beginning. This idea of a divine womb and consciousness before light. That sounds incredibly profound.
It is. It's a theme found in many mystical cosmologies, this notion of a primordial matrix, a sort of feminine void or potential space that existed before light, before creation as we know it.
Where do we see this?
Well, in some Gnostic Christian texts, like the Apocryphon or John, there's a figure named Barbelo. She's described as the universal womb before everything.
The universal womb.
Yes, an androgynous mother-father principle, the first emanation through whom the spiritual universe, the pleroma or fullness, was conceived. She's revered as the mother of all eons.
A primary creative force, fundamentally feminine or at least androgynous.
Exactly. And you find a very strong parallel in Kabbalah with the Sephira Bina, which means understanding. Bina is explicitly called Ima, the supernal mother.
The mother.
Yes, the great cosmic womb that receives the seed of divine spirit from Chokmah, wisdom, and gives birth to the lower seven Sephiro, the structures of creation. The Zohar calls Bina the upper mother, gestating the cosmos.
It's striking how consistent that womb imagery is. Does this appear in Eastern traditions too?
Oh, absolutely. Look at the Rig Veda, specifically the Nasadiya Sukta, the hymn of creation. It describes a state before existence, darkness hidden by darkness, an undifferentiated void or cosmic water.
Before anything arose.
Right. Until that one, Ted Ekam, arose through its own inner heat or desire. This is sometimes identified with Hiranyagarbha, the golden womb or golden egg, floating in the primordial waters, eventually hatching Brahma, the creator.
The golden womb.
Yeah.
Another powerful image.
And then there's Taoism. Before the duality of yin and yang, Taiji, there is Wuji, no extremity, or without ridgepole. Pure, undifferentiated emptiness, the source.
The unmanifest.
Precisely. The Tao Te Ching calls the Tao in this state, the nameless void, the mother of the 10,000 things, the source from which all manifestation arises.
So the pattern seems clear. Before light, the active projecting principle, yang. There's this fertile darkness, this receptive void, yin, an empty womb ready to birth form.
That's the core idea. And this divine womb concept is almost universally linked to the divine feminine or the great mother goddess archetype.
Like Nut in Egypt.
Exactly. The sky goddess swallowing the sun each night and birthing it each morning. Or in Hindu Tantra and Shaktism, the goddess Devi is revered as Jagad Yonu, literally the womb of the world. The yoni symbol itself represents this cosmic womb of Shakti.
Even in Sufism.
There are connections. God's infinite mercy, Rama, shares the same Arabic root, RHM, as the word for womb, Rahim. There's a famous Hadith Qudsi where God says the womb derives its name from him, the merciful Ar-Rahman. Rumi often uses womb-like imagery for the nurturing aspect of divine love.
Wow. The essence of compassion tied to the womb. That brings up a huge question. What about consciousness in that state? Before light, what was that like?
That's where it gets very mystical. Generally, pre-light consciousness is described as undifferentiated unity, pure being, pure awareness, but without an object, without distinctions.
Pure potential.
Yes. In Kabbalah, before the Sephirot, before even the first glimmer of light, there is Ein Sof, the infinite, the limitless, an absolute unmanifest reality that's beyond even description as light.
Beyond light.
Yes. The light of Ein Sof is sometimes spoken of, but Ein Sof itself is the absolute unknowable. Creation begins with an act called Simsum, a contraction or withdrawal of this infinite light, leaving a conceptual void or space into which the first ray of creative light, Kavaf, could then emerge.
So an infinite potential contracts to make space for manifestation.
That's one way to understand it. Gnosticism talks about the silent depth, the Father in utter stillness, before the first thought, Anoia, arose. Neoplatonism speaks of the One, Hen, pure unity beyond all attributes.
And this pre-light state is often characterized as darkness.
Yes, but it's crucial to understand it's not darkness as in evil or ignorance, but darkness as in mystery, the unmanifest, the incomprehensible potential before differentiation.
Like the darkness described by mystics.
Exactly. Think of the cloud of unknowing in Christian mysticism, entering a divine darkness that paradoxically feels radiant. Or Sufi descriptions of fana, annihilation in God, experiencing an all-consuming oneness. Taoism's ideal of returning to the uncarved block, primal simplicity, like an infant, perhaps like being back in that womb.
So the divine wound is the symbol of potential creation.
And pre-light consciousness is the experience or the nature of that undifferentiated potential itself.
The deep esoteric insight here seems to be that manifestation, everything we know, emerges from this infinite, often feminine associated mystery. Before the word, there's silence. Before light, the void.
But crucially, it's not an empty void. It's a living void, pregnant with possibility. That's why so many creation stories start with darkness not as chaos to be overcome, but as the sacred womb of divine intent.
Contemplating that could help us connect with our own inner ground of being.
That's the idea, finding that inner stillness, that womb of emptiness within, from which our own light can emerge renewed.
And this all connects back, doesn't it? The RaSha Body as the cosmic mother's womb or template, the violet flame working to heal distortions, perhaps related to that feminine principle healing the womb of time.
Exactly. It paints a picture where creation is this constant dance, this marriage of light and darkness, yang and yin, and the shadow body, the violet flame, they operate right at that dynamic interface.
Understanding these threads really seems to weave together a more holistic view of spirituality.
It does. Honoring both the unknowable dark womb and the emerging light seed seems key to deeper understanding.
Okay, this leads us perfectly into the final piece we wanted to discuss, the RaSha channelers. Given everything we've talked about, how do they fit into this picture?
Well, based on the framework, the RaSha channeler seems to be described as someone who embodies this understanding. They consciously work with that shadow template, those pre-light fields we were just discussing.
So they're actively engaging with this shadow potential realm.
That's the idea. Their function is described in terms of things like transmuting collective trauma held in these fields, guiding lost soul aspects back to source, and, importantly, helping to restore the sanctity of that feminine void space.
Acting on multiple levels.
Apparently, yes. On a personal level, they might interpret or help clear unresolved frequencies or ancestral patterns within someone's individual RaSha layer. On a planetary level, they're said to work with Earth's energy grids, particularly what are called womb grids or shadow gates, to transmute trauma related to, say, feminine principle distortions or major historical conflicts.
And even cosmic.
Yes, cosmically, they're described as anchoring these amethyst plasma codes, tying back to the violet flame to help restore fallen matrices through qualities like deep compassion and stillness.
So they're like facilitators of healing at a very foundational level. How does this role actually manifest? What do they do?
The sources describe various functional expressions. One might be like an emotional grid technician, helping translate pre-verbal trauma into coherent release through things like breath work, toning, or simply holding silent space.
Okay.
Another could be an astral soul fragment recaller, assisting people in retrieving parts of themselves lost through shock or trauma, a concept familiar in shamanism, too.
Soul retrieval, essentially.
Something like that, yes. Or a void witness midwife, someone who can hold that incredibly deep, still, compassionate space when a person is undergoing profound soul unraveling or integration.
Holding the space for deep transformation.
Exactly. Also, a reweaver of dark light, facilitating that sacred union between polarities within themselves and others. And finally, a carrier of the Sophianic flame, consciously channeling that amethyst violet plasma into planetary fields or individual souls.
These roles sound ancient. Do we see archetypes like this in the older traditions we've touched on?
I think we absolutely do. Think about the Egyptian priests or priestesses, the keepers of the chute, who guided souls through the duat, the underworld, dealing with shadow aspects.
Right.
Or in Kabbalah, the Lurianic mystics who practiced tikkun olam, the repair of the world, by gathering scattered divine sparks, often through intense meditative work.
Dealing with the shards.
Precisely. Think of the silent Sufi dervishes, embodying stillness, holding that space of divine mercy, the Rahim, or the Gnostic idea of vessels of Barbello, working to restore Sophia's fallen light.
Tantric practitioners working with Kali energy.
Exactly, embracing the dark goddess energy for profound alchemy. Even the Taoist sage who achieves Wu Ji disappears into the void and returns embodying harmony. They all echo this archetype of bridging shadow and light, conscious and unconscious, for healing.
It really seems like a universal function interpreted through different cultural lenses.
I believe so. And the specific connection made in the modern material is between these RaSha channelers and the Amethyst Order. They are said to be energetically encoded with Amethyst Order frequencies, carrying those plasma templates for pre-light purification. They supposedly access these magenta violet ray fields, perhaps in trance or dream states.
So their presence itself becomes transformative.
That's the implication, that they act as living anchors for this hierogamic transmutation, like living acupuncture points on the grid, where distortion can dissolve back into pure source memory just by their presence and conscious intent.
So they are these vital, maybe often unseen agents working at that fundamental level of integrating shadow and light.
Exactly. One source described them beautifully as being like the bass note in music, not always the obvious melody, but providing the underlying coherence felt even when not consciously heard. Keepers of that coherence working across time.
Okay, so wrapping up this deep dive, it's really quite something to see how these threads, the RaSha Body, the Violet Flame Amethyst Order, the Divine Womb, weave together across so many different traditions.
It really is. And the core takeaway for me is this fundamental dance of darkness and light. Not as opposites in conflict, but as, well, essential complementary aspects of the cosmos and us.
And this figure of the RaSha channeler, representing that active principle of integration, bringing shadow back to light, that feels really significant, even if it's often unseen work.
Definitely. And it leaves us with a powerful thought to ponder based on one of the sources. Before light, there was memory. Before sound, there was silence. Before form, there was the womb. And within that womb, light and shadow remembered they were one.
Wow.
So the question for everyone listening might be, what about your own inner womb? That place of deep potential within you? What memories, what silence, what shadow aspects might be waiting there, ready to inform your current form, ready to dance with your light?